in my career to work for two amazing companies and for really iconic global brands, obviously Axe, as well as Dove and Dove Men Plus Care, and then obviously, as I mentioned, Philips in my previous work life, and across 3 different countries too. Obviously, the United Kingdom, which is my home today, and the Netherlands and Italy too. All right, so before we start, I just wanted to summarize what we will cover today and what you can expect from this session. We look at 2 things really. The first one is what makes a good innovation and what makes perhaps a not so good innovation. And then we look at how do we create a good innovation? How do we go from idea to reality? Let me say, one step before idea even, we go from pretty much nothing to an idea and to a real product. Right. Now, before we go into the content, some of you might be asking yourself, okay, is it worth staying on the call? Do we really need to have a masterclass on product innovation? I'm afraid the answer is yes. Now, I'm using here, I'm showing the kind of the outcome of a research done a few years back by a person called Clayton Christensen. Professor Christensen sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but he was seen in the industry as a guru of product innovation. He worked many years at Harvard Business School. And he did this research, which showed that every single year, about 30,000 new products are introduced in the market across different industries. Now, the problem is about 95% of them fail. And in fact, not only they fail, but they fail within the first 12 months from launch. Now, the reason why these products fail are really varied. There's different reasons depending on the product. But Professor Christensen found that there was one very common reason, and that reason was that those products were just not relevant for anybody. In some cases, brands launching those products didn't even know who the consumer target was. They didn't offer something relevant for those target consumers. They didn't know their needs, and so on and so forth. So keep some of these themes in mind, because they will come back in the next few minutes as we go through the content. Okay, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. All right, so let's start from discussing what a good innovation looks like. And for both sections of the masterclass today, I love, and please allow me to use some I hope, useful Axe examples. So let's start from the first one. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, so here we go back to the origins of our brand. So the visual you see on screen right now is the very first visual Unilever used when they launched Axe in 1983. In 1983, Unilever came and said, I'm gonna launch the first ever eau de toilette deodorant for all over the body application. If you go to the next one. Now, this was the start of a journey that then created one of the most iconic brands in Unilever portfolio. And I would say one of the most iconic brands globally. In fact, still today, Axe is the world #1 men fragrance brand globally. So, I can tell you based on this couple of facts, this was definitely a very good innovation, a very successful one. Why was it so good? If we go to the next slide. So there are a few elements, if you ask me what is the recipe for a very good innovation, I would start by telling you the first thing, super important. I mentioned it before when we were talking about Professor Christensen research. Make sure you are very clear on who your consumer target is. In 1983, Unilever went and said, and they didn't say, look, I'm going to target all of the French population. They said, no, I'm going to select a specific consumer target of 16 to 35-year-old men, And even more specifically, those 16 to 35-year-old men that are concerned about their attractiveness, and they are actively looking for personal care products that are specifically designed for men. Let me tell you, in 1983, this was quite new because most of the personal care brands at that time were actually designed for women. There was not a lot of options when it came to personal care products designed for men specifically. And then once the consumer target is very clear, what Unilever did was to create a product innovation that had three key elements. The first one was it was very relevant. What Unilever knew already in 1983 was that smelling good was actually one of the best and fastest ways for guys to feel that little bit more attractive and confident in themselves. So by providing an eau de toilette deodorant, they were really answering to that need of attractiveness and confidence. The second is appealing and unique. As I mentioned, the way Unilever positioned Axe in 1983 was the first ever eau de toilette deodorant for men for all over the body application. There was nothing quite like that in the French market at that time. It was a truly unique combination of, from one side, the high quality of the fine fragrance world, and from the other side, the effectiveness of a deodorant. And then finally, they offer great value. Now, Axe in 1983 was launched at a 20% premium versus the rest of the deodorant category. But that 20% was seen as a great value because, as I mentioned, to the consumer target of 16 to 35-year-old men, looking for products to help them with their attractiveness, the proposition of Axe was extremely relevant, appealing, and unique, and therefore they were happy to pay that 20% premium. Now, if you go to the next slide, I just want to add one layer to all of this. Now, there are a lot of innovations that by themselves are really good. There is a clear consumer target. They are answering to a very clear consumer need. They are relevant. They are unique. They are appealing. They also offer good value. But the fact the innovation is good in its own regards doesn't mean that is the right thing to do. So in Unilever, we also look at what we called the drivers of market growth. So a very good innovation, in order to be truly successful in market, needs to do at least one of the following three things. It either needs to drive more users into the category where it plays. Alternatively, it needs to drive more usage of that category. Or finally, it needs to drive more value. Now, luckily, in 1983, Unilever did all of that with Axe. They attracted new users. So, those 16 to 35-year-old guys perhaps were not using deodorants at the time because they were looking for something that they couldn't find. It drove more usage because the product was for all over the body application, whilst a standard deodorant is for underarm application only. And also it drove more value because the product was a little bit more expensive than a standard deodorant. So a great win-to-win situation. The product was really well thought through, was hitting a lot of the boxes. But also the innovation had the ability and the potential to drive market growth, which is essential if you want to have a successful innovation. All right, so hopefully that's clear. Now, if we go to the next slide, now we discussed the principles, the theory behind a really good innovation, but now how do we create one? And as I mentioned, in a slightly different way, but this is certainly what works for me and for the brand. Now, if we go to the next slide. Right, so we talked about the launch of Axe in France in 1983. Now, today, well, this year is the 40th birthday of the brand. So 40 years after, we just introduced an amazing innovation in many of our key markets, and the visual you see on screen right now is the visual that we are using for the United States. And we call that new product innovation the Axe Fine Fragrance Collection. The Axe Fine Fragrance collection actually borrows a lot of the ideas we had in 1983, but modernizes them. So it's a range of premium body sprays with really high quality ingredients and fragrances that smell finer than the finest fragrances. We actually tested this product in a blind test with a few consumers in the US. And guess what? They preferred Axe fragrances to really expensive eau de toilette products. And by the way, I should say, this innovation was created and developed by Hugo and his team. So well done to him. And perhaps, if you have any difficult question for him later, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks, Andrea.
Let's go to the next slide. All right. So when we create a new innovation in Unilever, we like to use a framework which we call the Product Innovation 6 Ps. Now, as I mentioned, different companies treat the innovation Ps differently. So in some companies, the Ps are 4, in some are 5, in some are 6, perhaps in some are 8 or 10. For Unilever, the framework we use is the 6 Ps. So let me tell you very quickly what these 6 Ps are, and then I'll tell you how do we go about creating them. The first P, which is really the first one we create and perhaps the most important, is what we call the proposition. The proposition is the theoretical, conceptual idea behind a potential product solution, a product that we think might answer to a consumer need, to a consumer pain, or to a consumer gain. So we call that proposition. The product is, as the word says, the actual product. So it's a combination, in case of Axe, of amazing fragrances, formulations, ingredients, technologies, and so on and so forth. Then we go to pack. Pack means a couple of things. When we refer to pack, it might be about the pack structure, the shape of the pack, the functionality of the pack, and so on and so forth. Or it could be the pack graphics, the visual graphics that we put on the pack to communicate the product. And then we've got price. And when we talk about price, we actually start from something that in Unilever we call strategic price positioning. So we think strategically about, should this product be positioned at the same level of pricing of other products in the market, or should it be a bit more premium, or should it be a bit more affordable? And then obviously we give some pricing recommendation. We talk about recommended retail price. And then finally, promotion. This is what, in other words, you would call communication. So promotion summarizes everything which is with regards to communication ideas, communication campaigns, media strategies, and so on and so forth. And then finally, place. Very important P. And this is all about, making choices in terms of which retail channels are we going to sell this product in, what is our in-store activation plan, and so on and so forth. So these are all elements that make up what we call our product innovation 6 Ps, or sometimes we refer to it as the marketing mix of a new product innovation. And you've got to sort all of them out if you want to have a really good innovation. Right, so as I mentioned, really, really key to start from your consumer target. Now, typically, the consumer target for Axe in many of our markets is fairly broad. We like to create products and communication for guys that are in between 12 to 24 years old. So quite a broad consumer target. Now, for this specific innovation, though, we defined something a bit more specific. And we created what we call a creative target, something a little sharper, which we think is made of those people that will be the early adopters of our innovation. And here, Hugo and his team, together with the help of our research agencies, looked at a mix of demographic data, such as the age of those guys, 18 to 24-year-olds, perhaps finishing college, perhaps starting their job, but also, again, behavioral and attitudinal data, such as, is perhaps a guy that has a vibe, is relatively cool, feels relatively attractive already, but it's not perfect, you know. It does have those little moments of self-doubt, perhaps, and would love to have products and brands that help him to feel that little bit more confident in social situations. Let's go to the next one. Then now we have a consumer target, and but you know, what are the needs, pains, and gains of those guys? And we look into what we call consumer insights. Now, consumer insights are pretty tricky to find, and they are quite different from what we call facts. So let me tell you the difference. You see there on the chart, the fact that guys want to smell good is a fact. I'm pretty sure that if I send a survey to everybody in the call right now, and I ask you, would you like to smell good? I would have probably a 99.9% yes answer. So that's not a particularly interesting data point. I know that guys want to smell good. That, you know, that is a fact. Now, in order to find an insight, you need to go one step behind. You go and try and find what we call the truth behind the truth. What we found with research was that guys want to smell good because smelling good makes them feel that little bit more attractive and confident in themselves. And this is very close to what we discovered in 1983 when Axe was launched in France. Now, if you actually want to go one step further, you also look for attention. What is attention? Well, we know that guys want to smell good because that makes them feel a little bit more attractive and confident in themselves. But unfortunately, the solutions they have today aren't perfect. Why are they not perfect? Because fine fragrances are way too expensive. They are a bit serious too. Standard body sprays sometimes can smell too cheap. And deodorants can only help against odors. So there is a tension there. You see, we have a fact, but we went a little bit beyond the fact. We know why that fact is a fact. And we also know there is a tension. So there is a consumer need, there is a consumer pain there. Now that you've got an insight, yeah? Let's go to the next chart. Now, after having identified the consumer target and the consumer insights, in Unilever, we create what we call the proposition. And as I mentioned, proposition is the theoretical and conceptual idea behind the potential solution to that consumer insight. For Unilever, the kind of key elements of a great concept are three things. The first one is, as I mentioned, you need to have a clear consumer insight. The second one is you need to deliver a product benefit, which, as we mentioned earlier, needs to be relevant, appealing, and unique, and also offer really good value. And you need to have what we call the reasons to believe. These are technologies, ingredients, formulations, everything that makes your benefit believable. Now, we normally create combinations of those three elements into what we call a concept board. So you see an example of a concept board here on the left. And we start testing and discussing those potential solutions with consumers with the help of our consumer marketing intelligence colleagues, as well as a lot of research partners we have globally. Now, typically you want to do that in two steps. So you start from exploration. You explore many different potential ideas, alternative ideas. Typically, that is a step that is done in depth, and you want to have really rich feedback from consumer. So we normally use qualitative consumer research for that step. And then the second step is typically about narrowing down all of the alternatives, finding which of the different alternatives might be best at answering that consumer need, pain, and gain. And we validate the best alternative. We try and understand, is this alternative truly relevant, appealing and unique, and also does it offer really good value? And typically that is a step, again, we take together with our consumer marketing intelligence colleagues using quantitative consumer research. Now, before we move on to the next step of the process, if you just go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a view of what happened when we tested our proposition for the Axe Fine Fragrance collection with consumers. And again, credit to Hugo and his work. Actually, this concept ticked a lot of boxes. It was seen as highly relevant by consumers because it was tapping into a real consumer needs, a need that was getting even more relevant in a period of time, which is the one of today, after a pandemic, after COVID, where social occasions are coming back very strongly. People want to get together, guys want to get together with their friends, with their partners. And they do need help to, feel confident enough to be part of those groups, of those social occasions. And it was a proposition that was seen as highly appealing and unique because, frankly, partly borrowing some of the ideas we had in 1983, but modernizing them. Once again, the Axe Fine Fragrance collection was offering something that standard deodorants were getting nowhere close to, the quality of fine fragrances plus, the effectiveness of a deodorant. And then finally, was it offering great value? Yes. When we tested this concept, we also told consumers that the product was going to be a little bit more expensive than a standard Axe body spray. And when I say a little bit more expensive, I'm talking about something in between 20 to 40%. But again, because it was such a relevant proposition, so appealing, so unique, consumers were very happy to potentially pay a premium for it. So really well done again, Hugo, ticked a lot of boxes. And we knew that we had a very, very interesting, potential solution at end. Now, if we go to the next slide. So if, you are on the call and you like products, obviously the next step is the one for you, because once we know that we have potentially a really good solution, what we need to do is to make it happen. And so we start working on the product, on the pack, and on the price positioning of the innovation. And I would say from my side, product and pack are particularly exciting. Product, in this particular case, we work with some of the world's best perfumers to create really high quality fragrances that are as good as, or sometimes even better than, all the Toilette products. We work with our research and development colleagues to select the right ingredients, the right technologies, and create our formulation. And obviously, eventually, you also work with your supply chain colleagues to understand how do we manufacture and supply the new product. And then pack. So here was all about working with, again, top class pack design agencies and create pack graphics that were incredibly appealing, really standing out on shelf, and could bring to life in a very exciting way the story of our fragrances. And then finally, price. Based on all of the consumer evidence that you collect in the previous step when you test the proposition, and based on a lot of work you do with your sales team, your customer development colleagues, you try and define what is the strategic price positioning that could maximize the value perception of this innovation. So again, as I mentioned, in our case, the decision was to position this new range at a slight premium. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, it really does not matter if you have an amazing product, but nobody knows about it. And therefore, the fifth step is the last one, but is not the least important, is one of the most important too. And we could actually do a masterclass only on this fifth step, but it's the step of the promotion and the place, so the last two P's. And this is all about, working with really talented, advertising agencies. In the case of Axe, the brand works with a group called IPG, a group of agencies called IPG, to create full 360 comms campaign. In our case, we also decided in some markets to find the talents to promote the new innovation. So it's the example of the famous rapper Lil Baby in US. We also decided in this specific case to have a very large PR credentialing program, because we really wanted to convince our consumers, but also the media, the trade, as well as influencers online, that yes, it was true. Our fragrances were so good. They smelled even better than famous eau de toilette products, and obviously much more. As I mentioned, this is a really key step, and we could have a 1.5 hour masterclass only on this last step. Now, when it comes to innovation, I think words don't make justice.